I never thought I'd be the one carrying a secret like this, something so big, so heavy, that I still struggle to breathe when I think about it. If I'm being honest, I wish I could forget it ever happened. But the truth doesn't go away just because we want it to. This is a story about me and my dad, and a secret that changed the way I looked at him forever. A secret I've never told anyone. Not my friends. Not my mom. Not even my therapist. And now, I'm telling you. It started on an ordinary weekend, the kind where everything feels normal, familiar smells from the kitchen, football playing low on the TV, my dad making his usual jokes while sipping his coffee. We were always close. I was a teenager, going through the motions of school and figuring out life, but Dad was like my anchor. He coached my soccer games, helped me with my math homework, and gave me advice about girls even when it was awkward. I used to think I knew him. Really knew him. But that one night changed everything. I was supposed to be asleep. It was late, almost 1 a.m., and I'd woken up thirsty. I got out of bed, headed to the kitchen quietly so I wouldn't wake anyone. That's when I heard voices. Not just voices, his voice. My dad's. Low, serious, but different. Softer in a way I didn't recognize. Curious, I followed the sound, expecting to find him watching a movie or maybe on the phone with a friend. But what I saw, it stopped me cold. He wasn't alone. And he definitely wasn't watching a movie. I didn't want to believe what I saw. I remember standing there frozen, like my body shut down. My heart was beating out of my chest. I didn't even fully understand what was happening at first. But it clicked quickly. Too quickly. My dad, he was with someone who wasn't my mom. I know what you might be thinking. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. But the way they looked at each other, the way they spoke, it wasn't just a casual thing. There was history there. Familiarity. Emotion. And worse, they didn't even notice me. I backed away slowly, quietly, heart pounding so hard I thought they'd hear it echo down the hallway. I barely made it back to my room without falling over. Lying there in the dark, I felt like the ground had shifted underneath me. The man I looked up to, the man I trusted more than anyone else, he was keeping something huge from us. From me. From my mom, who loved him so much she used to tear up just talking about how lucky she was. I wanted it to be a bad dream. But it wasn't. The next morning, everything was normal again. My dad acted like nothing had happened. Joking over pancakes, kissing my mom on the cheek, asking me if I'd done my homework. I sat there, watching him, pretending to laugh, pretending to eat, pretending to be okay. But I wasn't okay. And nothing felt normal anymore. Days passed. Then weeks. And I kept that secret locked inside. Not because I wanted to protect him, but because I didn't know what to do. How do you tell your mom the man she loves is cheating? How do you even bring it up? How do you confront your dad without breaking your whole family in one sentence? The weight of it started changing me. I got quieter, moodier. I began avoiding my dad, making excuses not to go on our usual weekend trips or father-son hangouts. He noticed, but I think he thought it was just teenage stuff. He had no idea I knew. And I never let on. But I saw him differently now. Every word he said sounded fake. Every hug felt hollow. I started wondering who he really was, and what else he might be hiding. And then came the second blow. Something happened a few months later that made everything even more complicated. Something I never saw coming. Something that forced me to make a decision that still haunts me to this day. That's where everything shifted. Again. And that's the part I've never told anyone, until now. I started noticing things more after that night, little things that didn't seem important before, but now stood out like red flags. Late-night phone calls that ended when someone walked into the room. Random errands that took way too long. A quiet tension in the air when Mom wasn't around. I realized how many times my dad had gone out alone without giving a reason. How often he'd forgotten to answer calls when he was out. I hadn't seen it before. Maybe I didn't want to. But now, it all started to connect. I was living with this knot in my chest that never really loosened. And I was too scared to do anything about it. At school, I smiled when I had to, laughed when expected, but it felt like I was acting in someone else's life. I'd lie awake at night going over every possibility. What if I was wrong? What if it was a one-time thing and he regretted it? But then, I'd remember how easy it looked for him to switch back into dad mode. How natural it was for him to just carry on. That's what scared me the most. How normal he seemed. Like none of it bothered him. Then, one Saturday afternoon, I heard my parents arguing. I had my headphones in, music playing, but their voices still came through the walls. It wasn't a yelling match, more like tense whispers, sharp and serious. I couldn't hear the words, but I could feel the weight of them. I snuck closer, just enough to catch a glimpse. Mom's eyes were red, like she'd been crying. Dad looked defensive, arms crossed, barely making eye contact. She walked away first, leaving him standing there, staring at the floor like he was lost in thought. That night, he knocked on my door. He never did that. Usually, he just walked in and started talking. But this time, he paused. Asked if we could talk. I said I was tired. He stood there for a second, maybe hoping I'd change my mind, then just said, "All right. Love you, bud." I didn't say it back. I couldn't. I watched him walk down the hallway, and for the first time, he looked small. Like he was carrying something too. Maybe he knew I knew. Or maybe he was just feeling guilty. I don't know. A week later, I accidentally found something that added another layer to everything. I was looking for a charger in his desk drawer, something I'd done 100 times before. But this time, there was a small envelope tucked under a pile of papers. I wasn't trying to snoop, I swear I wasn't. But something made me pause. I pulled it out and opened it. Inside were printed photos. Nothing graphic, but personal. Intimate. My dad, and the same woman I saw that night. Different places. Different clothes. Different times. These weren't just photos of a mistake. This was something ongoing. A second life. A second version of him I'd never known. I stared at those pictures, feeling like the air had been knocked out of me. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. It was about betrayal. A betrayal of trust, of honesty, of everything our family was supposed to be. And now I had proof. Real, physical evidence. But I didn't know what to do with it. I shoved the envelope back where I found it, closed the drawer, and left the room like it was on fire. For days, I avoided him completely. Every time he tried to talk, I found a way out. He started asking if something was wrong. I said no. I lied. Just like he was lying. The tension at home kept building. Mom seemed more distant. Dad tried harder to be present, offering to cook dinner, clean the garage, take us out for ice cream like when we were kids. But the more he tried, the worse it felt. Like he was covering up something he knew could explode at any moment. And then, one afternoon, while Mom was out, he sat me down in the living room. I could tell this wasn't going to be a regular talk. His face was serious, his voice low. He said, "There's something I need to tell you." I felt my heart start pounding again, like it did that night months ago. But what he said next wasn't at all what I expected. And that's when everything started to shift again. I braced myself for what my dad was about to say. Every part of me expected a confession, an apology, maybe even the truth finally being laid out in the open. But that's not what happened. He started talking about trust. About how sometimes people make decisions they can't explain. How families go through hard times. At first, I thought he was working up to admitting everything. But instead, he started talking about me. About how I'd been distant, different lately. He asked if I was okay. If something had happened at school. If I was struggling with anything personal. He kept circling around the real issue like he was afraid to touch it. I sat there, nodding, answering in short, careful words, trying to hold myself together. The entire time, I kept wondering, is this part of the act? Was he pretending again, deflecting? Or was he really trying to connect? Either way, he never brought up the woman. Never mentioned what I saw. I realized then, he had no idea I knew. Or maybe he did, and he was just hoping I'd never say it out loud. After that conversation, things got more confusing. He started spending more time at home, being more involved. He helped cook dinner with Mom, offered to drive me to school, started asking more questions about my life. It almost felt normal, almost. But I couldn't shake the feeling that everything he did was a cover, like he was trying to paint over something ugly without actually fixing it. And that made it worse. Meanwhile, I started noticing changes in Mom too. She was quieter, more tired. Her smiles didn't last as long. I caught her staring out the window a lot. Once, I even heard her on the phone late at night, whispering, saying something like, "I just don't know anymore." I couldn't hear who she was talking to, but the tone in her voice made my stomach twist. Did she know something? Was she starting to suspect him? I was stuck in the middle, carrying a secret that was slowly tearing me apart. I didn't know who to protect anymore, my mom, who deserved the truth, or my dad, who was still the person that taught me how to ride a bike, who held me when I had nightmares, who called me champ even when I struck out. I hated him for what he'd done. But I also missed who he used to be. Or who I thought he was. Then something else happened that flipped everything again. At school, I got called into the counselor's office. They said my mom had reached out, worried about my sudden change in behavior. The counselor asked if I was dealing with anything at home. I could feel the pressure building in my chest. It would have been so easy to say it right then. To finally let it all out. But I didn't. I said I was fine. I lied. Again. Later that day, I found a message on my dad's phone. I wasn't trying to look, but it buzzed while he was in the shower. My name was mentioned in the preview. I opened it. It wasn't from my mom. It was her. She was asking if he knew. If I had said anything. And my dad had replied. That's when I realized he did know. My hands were shaking as I stared at the message on his phone. He knows. He saw us that night. I think he's going to say something. And then, right below it, his reply, he won't. He's scared. I must have read it 5 times, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. He wasn't just aware, I'd been a part of their conversation. Like I was some kind of problem they were trying to manage. Like I wasn't his son anymore, just a risk. My heart was racing so fast I felt lightheaded. Every emotion hit me at once, anger, confusion, sadness. But more than anything, I felt trapped. They were talking about me behind my back. Planning around me. Like I didn't matter. I couldn't even look at him when he walked out of the bathroom. He laughed about something on TV, towel around his shoulders, acting like everything was fine. And maybe that's what broke me a little. The way he could just switch into dad mode, like none of this was real. Like we weren't all standing on the edge of something about to collapse. I didn't sleep that night. I just kept thinking about Mom. About what she'd do if she knew. Would it destroy her? Would she leave? And what would that do to our family? To me? But also, how long was I supposed to keep this secret? How long could I keep pretending? The next morning, my mom made pancakes, her comfort food move. Dad kissed her cheek and thanked her. I watched it all, sick to my stomach. And then Mom looked at me, smiling, and asked if everything was okay. I almost told her right there. I almost said it. But I didn't. Instead, I looked at my dad. He was watching me. Waiting. There was something cold in his eyes. Like he dared me to say something. And that's when I made the decision. I was going to confront him. Alone. Face to face. And what happened that night is something I'll never forget. That night, I waited until the house was quiet. Everyone had gone to bed. I stood outside my parents' room for what felt like forever, my hand hovering near the door, my heart pounding in my ears. I wasn't sure what I was going to say, or how I was even going to start. But I knew I couldn't hold it in anymore. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. It was about trust. Family. The truth that had been poisoning everything. I finally knocked. He opened the door looking half asleep, surprised to see me. "What's up, bud?" he asked, his voice low and calm, like he hadn't been hiding a double life for months. I stepped into the hallway, closed the door behind me, and looked him straight in the eyes. "I know," I said. Just that. 2 words. His face didn't change right away. No shock. No panic. Just this slow, silent realization. Then came the sigh. "I was wondering when this would come out," he said. "Not if. When." Like it was inevitable. But before I could even ask the questions boiling in my chest, he cut me off with something I wasn't expecting. "There's more you don't know," he said. "It's not just about her." I froze. What did that mean? He sat down at the edge of the couch and ran a hand through his hair. "It started a long time ago," he said. "Before you were even born. And it's not just one person. It's not even one secret." That's when I felt it, that chill in my spine. He wasn't talking about one affair. He was talking about a life filled with lies. More layers. More people. More damage. And somehow, I was caught right in the middle. I had only uncovered the surface. What was underneath was something far darker. I sat across from him, numb, trying to process what he'd just said. My dad wasn't just hiding one secret, he'd been living a double life for years. He told me about the other woman, yes, but then there were more. There was someone before her. And even more shocking, someone after. He admitted he'd been caught once, early in his marriage, and somehow convinced Mom to stay. She gave him a second chance. A chance he never deserved. And I was the reason she stayed. For me. It felt like everything I believed about our family, our love, was fake. Manufactured. He said he never meant to hurt us. That he didn't know why he kept doing it. That he always came back because we were his real home. But the words felt empty. Too late. I had spent months carrying his secret to protect a version of him that didn't even exist anymore. Then he said something that completely flipped everything. He told me Mom knew. She'd known for a while. Not just about one affair, but all of them. She hadn't said anything to me because she wanted to protect me, not him. She thought I was too young. Too fragile. She'd kept the truth from me the same way I had from her. And the worst part? They had made an agreement to stay together, for appearances. For me. For the image of a happy family. That night, I walked out of the room different. Older, in a way. The truth had broken something, but it also cleared the fog. The final twist? A week later, I found a packed suitcase in the hallway. But it wasn't my dad who was leaving. It was my mom. I stood in the hallway staring at the suitcase, stunned. My mom looked calm, too calm. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just said, "I've done my part. I can't live like this anymore." There was no anger in her voice, just a quiet finality that hit harder than anything. She hugged me before she left and whispered, "I hope someday you understand why I waited so long." And then she was gone. My dad didn't say much after that. He stayed in the house, kept things routine, like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The house felt colder. Emptier. Like all the pretending had finally caught up to us and left nothing real behind. I kept going to school, kept showing up like always, but something inside me had shifted. I wasn't carrying the secret anymore. But I was carrying the weight of what came after. It took time to process everything, the lies, the betrayal, the years of pretending. But I realized something important. Keeping secrets to protect people doesn't always protect them. Sometimes it just delays the damage. And sometimes, the truth, no matter how painful, is what sets you free. I still think about that night I saw my dad in the car. How one moment changed everything. How a secret became a burden I was never meant to carry. This story isn't about exposing someone. It's about what happens when trust is broken. About family, truth, and how even love can't survive without honesty. And as for my dad and I, we still talk. But it's not the same. And I don't think it ever will be. 1.